Awesome. So today we want to go through now more on the scrapping. What I did on the scrapping for the data, and the tweets for Airtel, whereby we were looking. The main objective of this was to look for some questions from customers and then their replies from Airtel, so that we can be able to look at how Airtel responds back to its customers' questions. And today I'm going to take you through the code that I've been using. Um, as a disclaimer, first of all, we haven't been able to gather the data. It's a little bit on technical issues, more on the computer that I'm using isn't as strong as possible. Um, and we haven't been able to get the replies to the best maximum point. But in my belief is that by the end of this time, we'll have already understood more on what happens during scrapping of data, and basically on Twitter. We'll not touch much on any other scrapping on the website or any other platform, but majorly we'll touch on Twitter itself. And what really happens with scrapping of data is whereby you're trying to really get specific information, either from a website, from an app, or from any type of online platform. And in this case is whereby you don't want to just copy and paste. It's like if you have a lot of data that you need to get. So you cannot, like, let's say for example you have 100 websites you need to scrap. You cannot scrap each website just copy pasting the content you want. You want something that you want a code that is able to run and get this data for you by just one click. If you just run it immediately, it goes and gives you all that information. Now, there are two kinds um, of data scrapping that I've come across, and this mainly is the API one based, and the whereby you get the source code itself. And this is where with the API, you are getting data using the company's APIs. So if, let's say, for example, with Twitter have provided APIs that we are able to get access to their data within their databases. We don't need to go all the way and look at their specific website or load page by page just to scrap data. We're able to get this data directly from their databases where they have stored it. And from that data, we're able now to say, okay, this is the data we wanted, this is the data we don't want. Then with source code is whereby, let's say, for example, I've been given to scrap data from our website. Now, in this scenario, some websites don't have APIs. So if an institution doesn't have an API, all you have to do is look at the website and get data from directly from that website. So let's say, for example, um, the the YouTube page. If if I wanted to get a list of all the songs in a specific page, and YouTube doesn't have an API, I have to go directly to the source code that I can see from the browser and get that source code. And then from that source code, extract the data that I want. So these are two different ones, and most of the libraries that I've come across that are used majorly in scrapping data from websites, you find request, there's URL library, um, then beautiful soup, I think. These are data scrappers that you can use for the website. For APIs now, that's whereby you can access directly either a library that is used, that is majorly created for that specific API. And in this case, we have TP and get all tweets. These are more of libraries that have been tuned well for this specific API. So rather than going and building the API yourself, going to a point of building the API and all the parameters and all that, all you need to concern yourself is what you want to get. You don't need to know all the back. knowledge of how the API is working and all that. All you need to do is know what you want and how you can use the library to work with. So in this scenario, I've worked with both TweetPy and GetOld Tweets. And each one of them, the reason actually I've used these two specifically and in this scenario, I've used them actually in this scrapping of data, both of them, not interchangeably, because yes, you can use them interchangeably, but in this case, I've used them connecting with each other. Reason being, each one of them has limitations. And these limitations can really make your work a living hell if you don't really know these limitations, and you might start saying the library is broken or something. Like for example, with TweetPy, you cannot get data more than 30 days old. So if you wanted to get tweets from, let's say, last year, with with um, with TweetPy, it's going to be quite hard unless you just have the specific idea and you want to look at the status of that specific tweet. Another thing is that TweetPy has a limitation of 300 tweets. You can only ask for 300 tweets per query. You cannot ask more than 300. So let's say, for example, if I wanted to scrap for tweets speaking about football in Kenya, Manu and versus Arsenal, there's high probability the number of tweets for these specific matches are over 1,000. And if I request the first request with TweetPy, it will just bring me 300 and then it will time out. There's high probability it will even crash and tell you it has timed out, but not give you the data. So you end up wasting time and losing also not getting the data that you are looking for. And for these 300, the only other way you can be able to go around these limitation is mainly to have a 15-minute break after every 300 query. So you need to more make your code to automatically go to sleep for 15 minutes every time you sorry every time you request you query for 300, you have to go, your system has to go out to sleep for 15 minutes. And if this is data that you are looking for, and let's say for example you are looking for data for data to get to query for data that returns around, let's say 3,000. With 3,000, that's you'll have to query 10 times. And to query these 10 times, that means it's 15 minutes times 10. So 150 minutes. Those are 2 hours of break. So in that calculation, you haven't calculated the aspect how long it takes to get the 300 data, the 300 queries in every of these times. Probably it will take around 5 minutes or so. That means like you have already wasted more than 2 hours just to get 3,000 queries from people. Now, the other one that now I found a little bit easier is get all tweets. In this scenario, the difference between these two is that for the Twitter, you need authentication. You need to go all the way to Twitter and get an authentication and all that. But with get all tweets, the good thing is you don't need the access codes and the access token. All those tokens, you don't really need them. You only need them in Twitter. And you're able to get tweets as many as you want. These are specific scrapping. I did 200,000 tweets. Which of these tweets were since last year, August? So I can say a whole 1 year's tweets was scrapped using get all tweets. If I did with Twitter, it will not give me more than it will give me tweets from July this year to now. But now the limitation that comes with get all tweets is that when you get the object from get all tweets 3, the object just doesn't have all the attributes that you require. You might have different attributes, like in this scenario, you are looking for an attribute called reply ID string. That attribute wasn't there. So there are specific attributes. If you want them, you cannot really get them. So it becomes hard if you are looking for replies or you are looking to get specific data from each different tweets that are not here. Because for get all tweets, it will only give you tweets whereby it gives you the post, it gives you the date, it gives you the username, the date, the jail, the hashtag, the mention. It will give you all that data. But if you have any more data that you need to get, it will not provide that for you. So that's where I use these two interchangeably, because with Twitter it gives me a whole range of it all. If let me show you like a tweet that I got a bit. This is how each tweet from when you're using TweetPy comes looking like. All these. Now, all this is when looking at it is more of nonsensical aspects, but within it there are specific things you might want to know. Like for example, how many favorite count did the person get? So these you'll get from TweetPy. If you wanted to know, like for this specific tweet, how many people favorited it, how many people liked it, you can be able to get this. But for now, when you use get all tweets, it doesn't give you these. It will limit your capabilities. It will limit the things that you can be able to get, because it's mainly giving you general aspects, just giving you specific aspect that you may require. Um, Sorry, I know I'm turning a bit darker than usual. The sun is going down from where I am. All right. So I don't know if anyone has any question on that theoretic area. You could ask right now before you jump now to the code itself. I'll assume that means there is none. Awesome. So like every normal coding we have been doing with notebooks, we have always imported the libraries we need, and in this case I needed TweetPy and get all tweets, and also I needed pandas, especially to be moving my information from list format to a data frame, so that if I'm viewing it, I'm able to view it as a data frame. I'm also able to store it as a CSV later on. I also imported the YAM. With YAM, it's mainly it's what is holding my access codes. Um, Instead of exposing my access codes out there, I store them in a YAM file, which I read it. I read it here. From reading it here, I try and get the data that I want. It gives me the data that I want, and it's a good secure way that I'm able to make sure that my code is not seen, but as well I'm able to utilize it as well during this process. Now here, so what really I'm doing here is mainly reading my access code and then creating an authentication for my API. So this is the process you use for TweetPy to authorize your to authenticate your API, so that now your API is able to notice that, oh yeah, this is so and so, and they have access to this API. And with this with this API, you're able now to get access to different data as limited by your API. Now, the first thing I started was more of get all tweets, and mainly here what I wanted to do was get as many tweets as possible that have the Airtel KE mentioned. And this, after I went through Twitters and looked at how people reach out to Airtel. If I wanted services from a specific provider, how do I say, hey, so and so, can you help me out here? I need this assistance. And I saw most of them had the at Airtel KE. always in their messages. Whenever they want to ask for something, they had exactly that statement, which made told me like, okay, if I want to get this data, if I want to get the people, the questions they post on Airtel, all I need to do is use this key statement and ask for it. And now the count I wanted for my tweets, the number of tweets that I wanted to be returned back was 200,000. If the code had functioned to the full maximum, I plan to make this 2 million. Because with get hold it's easy, it's good, it's able. But because of limitation of TripI, I could not proceed to that area. Uh, so this is more of setting the parameters that I need here. And in these parameters, I'm just creating the criteria I want to look for. With get hold tweets, there are different parameters you can use. You can say, I want tweets from this time to this time. I want this number of tweets. I want tweets with these. The query statement here is mainly saying it's saying I want a tweet with these words. Look for tweets with these specific words in it. Here where the date is here I'm asking for since January this year first. I want all the tweets from January to now. So these criteria I'm asking for those tweets, all of them to come up to now. Now, at this point, I had to replace set marks, whereby this set marks was where I had brought this count. I did not care the timeline between where these tweets will be gotten, only cared about the number of tweets I get back. So this was more of the maximum number of tweets I wanted and how I wanted them to have which character. And then this now is how I request the tweet manager, the tweet manager function for get all tweets to get me the tweets that I want, following the criteria that I've already mapped up here. Uh, and as I said earlier, you can even indicate when, between what time, set since, and even set max or set up to when. So you're able to indicate when you want it last. Allow me to open this file. This is the documentation of that function. Now, if you remember when I said with get tweets, there is a lot of limitation. This is what I'm able to acquire. These are what I'm able to get using get tweets. So if whatever um, I want doesn't have its attribute is not here, that means I have now to figure out another way to get what I want. So with get all tweets, I'm able to get the ID of the tweet, the link, the username, and who it's to, text, date, retweets, favorite, mentions, hashtag, and geo. And then the manager is just get tweets. It doesn't have much. It doesn't have much of any coding behind it. Just get tweets, but with the Twitter criteria itself marked out there. Now, these are now the other set. The ways you can set. You can say you just want tweets from this specific user. You can say you want from what time, and then you want up to when. This is more of indicating between this time to this time, I want the tweets up to that. Or unless you want tweets before, let's say before 2020, you can just say here you want tweets before January 1st, 2020. You can also set the query search. What specific word are you looking for? And then they set top tweets, whereby you are just saying what number do you want the top tweets of this specific person, or what do you want, etc. Here's the set maximum tweets, whereby you are saying how much the number of tweets you want returned. In this scenario, it's more if you don't give the dates, you can ask for all that to be returned. So it doesn't have like a limitation like TWIPI of 300. Um, if you look at the documentation, you'll get to see how they use them. There are specific even set emojis. I've never used that, whereby it's more of a, you want to get the emojis only of the specific tweets and see what emojis have been used. Yeah. Then now, after now setting my criteria and then getting my tweets, the object tweets that gets returned from the Twitter, it's more of a package number of tweets, all of them put in one box. And then all these tweets are now, after being put in one box, I want to now have them iterated through each one of them and be able to get what I want. And in specific, I wanted to know the ID of the tweet, the date that tweet was tweeted, what was tweeted, the username, the number of retweets, the favorite geo, what mentioned, who were mentioned, and what hashtags were used. And this scenario, mostly what I was picturing was having to see, to compare the two different hashtag used in asking the question and hashtag used in replying. So my main picture was having to see all these measured while we are looking through, comparing them between the replies and the responses. Sorry, the questions and the responses. Um, then from here, I've created more of a list of lists. So in this, each list within our list, that's tweets list. In this tweet list, we get each row of tweet. It's more of each tweet or takes up a row, and in each row, all those rows are formed here. So I've used comprehension. I think that's the word by Python comprehension, whereby I loop through my object and get all the small the tweets, the small tweet objects, because I tested these. I did a bit of testing to see what really comes from these. Like when I get the tweets, what do I get? So I did that test a little bit down here. Forgive the error that is there. This was more of recurring. I went printing before each for loop. I went printing to see what comes back. And as you can see, when I request for a tweet, what comes back is an object. If I go through, if I say, let me iterate through the object, I get smaller objects. And these smaller objects are what are holding each tweet. These are each tweet's objects. Like the parameters, the attributes of each tweet is just one object. But when I try to see if I'm able to extract the different attributes here, it failed. This is a failure, telling me the object is not iterable. So this was more of me trying to see how far am I able to get data from those objects. All right. Then here I tried to test like how many tweets did I get back, and this was after changing the date. It's not the maximum. With the maximum, with the set maximum here as 200,000 tweets, I got these at 200,000. But this now without that maximum being set, just indicating the time that I want them. This was the number of tweets to around.
Excuse.
Yeah.
On the set criteria panda juu kiasi.
Yeah.
Hapo set scenes. Can you set to retrieve tweets sent from a specific place or around a certain geographical area?
A certain geographical area.
Yes.
Yes, there's a function for that. Though I haven't used it, I don't really know if how it works. So these set within. So you set within, let's say, 15 miles of your area where you are. So you can say set within 15 miles, 20 miles, 100 miles within your area, so that now it gets within your region where you are, it gets those tweets from that area. But I haven't used it, so I'm not really sure about it, because all the tweets that I've requested for bring the geo as 0. There is nothing. I don't get anything from the geo.
On that point, actually, that was what I was going to ask. Can you specify when you're retrieving the tweet, you retrieve the location of where it was tweeted from? If
Um,
someone had tagged location in their tweet.
so now, for most, I noticed that there's an attribute for geo. Most are enabled, but then I did not see how I'm able to do that. The only way I can think of it is now going with the API itself and seeing if it's able to get, because probably the limitation I have for my API is that I cannot get the geo details. But now, if it's the premium APIs, I believe with the premium APIs you are able to get the geolocation and all that, those details. But this is more on the premium aspect. Um, hold up, could you give me a second? Sorry about that. I had to set up my supper. Sitaki kulala njaa leo. Or where was I? Oh yeah. So Sling. So I think the geo tag, some of these might be more on the premium side because as I looked through the attributes of the different tweets, I saw some had geo enabled.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And still on the goja, kwa hii create a list, ebu pull the whole code, songesha hiyo ni
Create a
si
list.
hapo. Hii create a list holding list with mwisho ya hiyo
Or
code.
this one.
Yes,
Yes.
okay, now for example, the way you are looping, adding items to the list, whatever you have a tweet, you have extracted tweets which one of them does not have the field. For example, let's say retweet, it's zero. Italeta two blank or something.
Or tweet.
The code.
There's no tweet. It's not posted.
No, the tweet is there, but for example, haina kitu ka retweet.
Or in a retweet.
Yes.
So most of them have it as the value is 0.
Okay.
So like easy up if the value is 0. So like, but geo, it's not bringing any geo, it's bringing a blank. So the attribute is available, but it's not really giving us anything. So the attribute by it has a two empty string.
Good.
Yeah. All right. Any other? Awesome. So this was more of, so you can imagine since January, around 136,000 tweets with the term Airtel underscore KE were tweeted. And as you can see, some of them, it's more of it got the user more than it got the replies. And this scenario now, in this area, what I did was just convert it to a data frame. For those who don't know how to convert to a data frame, what I did was take my list that I had created, the list of lists, and then indicate what columns, what will be the names of my columns. And this always brings error if you if you make the number of the list the column names, if you make them more or less, it always crashes. It never functions. It always wants this to be exact number of functions you have. So if you have in a list within a list, let's say for example this one, you don't want any row within this list having less of these columns. You want them all to have exactly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9 columns. You don't want one list having 10 columns or having less than 9 columns, because if it has, it always crashes here. Or if you bring here and instead of putting 9 column names, you put 10 or 8, it will crash. Um, then mostly for me, I've seen most people always do head and tail. For me, I just do sample, whereby it just randomly selects for me the number of rows that I want. It just sends me a random number of data. As you can see from these, they are not like ordered in any way. The index is not ordered in any way. It went through the 95K row to even the 40,000 row. So all this is just jumbled up, like getting me the rows randomly, whereby now I'm able to look through them and assume that this is the data for it's a good representation of the data that I have. Because sometimes you might find the head having different data or the tail having totally different data. But with sample, it samples up your data and you're able to see if there are any changes around. And even if you refresh the same code again, it changes. It doesn't bring the exact same thing. Now, after now doing all those tweets, getting all those of 130K tweets, I looked at them here and saw those that were from Airtel themselves did not have Airtel mentioned. So any tweet that had a question for Airtel, it mentioned Airtel. So for me, my assumption in this scenario was that if you have mentioned Airtel KE, that means this is a question. So I came here, this code was mainly to say, give me all the data that mentions Airtel KE. I did both uppercase and lowercase, though I doubt in this scenario it does check. I'm not really sure if it matters in this scenario actually. It might or might not matter that much, but my assumption was just that okay, probably it matters. Probably if I do capital letters or small letters, it will give me different looks on this data. Um, then, because after the first several runs, these to get really these data, it took a whole night. Like I ran, let's say for example, I ran one like for 200K around 9 p.m. and around 3 a.m. when I woke up for the 10th time, that's when I saw, oh, it had already managed to scrap that data. And to avoid myself going to have to scrap this data every time, I need to run this code. Like for right now, I moved from my house. I'm totally in a different location, meaning that I already interrupted the internet itself. So for a notebook, I have to run it again. So to avoid having to run it again every time, if I move from this point and go to my room, I'll have to disconnect from the internet, from the power, and that will force me to run it again. So to avoid doing that every time I disconnect my laptop, I decided to have that data saved. So this data was mainly the data after I've already gotten those that are mentioned. As you can look down here, all these are mentioned, but it's not all of them. Some of them are like just conversations, things whereby it's comparing Airtel, Safaricom, and the rest. Mm. Or someone is say, let's say NTV might even mention Airtel in a news report. All that will appear because they have mentioned this particular person. Um, so for me, in this scenario, I knew of that, but I assumed because I could not really come to a level point whereby I can say I'm able to remove them in any other similar way unless I decide on who is who, like which users are more likely not to send. I create a list of which users are more likely not to send a question, but either post in a conversation. So someone like Moriu could be giving a post, could be a blogger and is giving information out there. And then I assume, no, this one is not a blogger, is someone asking a question. Or probably assume he's a blogger and yet he's asking a question, but asking both Safaricom and Airtel at the same time. So rather than just making those assumptions, I just let it be so that as we continue with the data itself, we learn it as we continue. Um, then I proceeded to call back my data. This code mainly helps. So most of the time, whenever I switch places, instead of having to run the retrieval here, I just run these first two, mainly because I use TWIPI or down. So I run this authentication so that when I use TWIPI, it is still authenticated. So there's no need of me running this cell at all every time. So I ignore all these aspects whereby querying for the data and changing it to a data frame to just reading from the CSV that I had earlier created. And after reading from this CSV I had already created, I look at it. The first thing I noted was there's always I did not mention. Oops, sorry. I did not mention a column name. Like for the index here, I did not say to have the index have the title index. When the index has the title index, it means that whenever I will read it again, it will still be considered as the index. So in my scenario here, I did not do that. So instead, it came with a column, with an added column that was called unnamed 0. Now, this is mostly for me to get rid of that column and get my data frame looking back as it was earlier with all the details and all that. And as you can see, the blank areas whereby they were empty now are filled with na. So all these nulls, if you remember earlier from the earlier these ones, there's nothing, like there's no null, there's nothing, it's just empty space. But when I read back my CSV, it comes with null. This one I can drop, we can drop while cleaning. That if you look at hashtag and see they are not of importance or geo, we can drop as we clean. Then there was this code specifically. This one is the code I began with. Mainly with this code, what I did was come to my data frame, go through each ID looking for responses with these names. Like I look for this ID and then look, am I able to get this name? Like every text that has, let's say for example, this first column, every that has Manu Onyango and has this ID. Like that's what I'm looking for. All the tweets that have, sorry, that have Manu Onyango, and then they say it's a reply to this ID. That's what I'm doing here. So I'm looking through my data frame, through the IDs, and each of those IDs I'm putting here as my ID, my tweet ID. Um, I saw last time we worked, I don't know if it's this class or it's the NLP class, we were introduced by one of the members on using enumerate. And I found enumerate is quite a good, it functions more like range when you're working with range. But in this scenario, it gives you two things. It gives you the information you want to get from your specific list, plus then the rotation time. So for every, let's say if every looping, it gives me, is this the first loop, is this the second loop, is it the third loop, etc. So this is what replaces like the numbers. It's telling me which number of loops. So I'm able to use these if I want to call call from my list. If I'm reading from, let's say, from my data frame, and I want this row, the row that was read this ID, I don't need to start looking for this ID directly from that row. I can just say, give me the row X. In this scenario, the name, as I said earlier, it's more of the username. And you can see here X has come to operation. So instead of me coming and saying, look for the row that has this ID and then find for me the username. Instead of saying that, I just say, look in this row and give me the username directly without needing all that, which means here I've saved time of the iteration. Um, it might be viewed like small microseconds to do all that, but these microseconds have come to find they are quite dangerous, specifically if you are dealing with a large data. Even let's say, for example, 100 microseconds form a second. So assuming this takes a second to read, and I'm reading over 300K, those are 300K seconds, meaning those are like several hours while doing the exact same that you are losing iterating through. Then now my question was here on, this is how TwiPy, you can use TwiPy to now get the data that you're looking for. The cursor is mainly a function by TwiPy, and mostly you find a cursor with so many different languages. They come up with cursors whereby this cursor is more of, it goes through everything. It goes through everything and comes up with as much data as possible. It goes through everything and brings as much data as possible. And this data is able to, now you're able to look at it as an object. Just a moment. All right. So in this scenario now, we are requesting for tweets, for it to search for tweets with a specific, with my name, with a specific name, with this name that I've requested for. And then I'm asking since a specific ID. So Twitter does like, it gives an ID to every tweet, and every tweet that is formed is more of an iteration, an addition to it. So if, let's say, for example, the today I tweet and then the ID is this, then somebody, whoever tweets after me, even if it's Donald Trump, it becomes a 3 here. So this increases according to the number of tweets that increase. And something that I was telling Ayub earlier on, something I noticed on a specific observation of a specific tweet, I looked at a tweet that was posted a specific time, and then a reply that came 2 hours later. And the difference between these are 2 hours difference. I looked at the difference within the IDs, and it was over 27 billion. No, actually trillion. So you can assume those are 27 trillion within 2 hours. How many are there every single day? So in this scenario, we are just asking for all the tweets from a specific tweet ID, all of them up to now, but filtering them to see those that have the name. So if it finds, let's say, for example, wow, these are hard names. Let me with Peter Cook. If I'm looking for Peter Cook 254, we search for Peter Cook's 254, all of them, but then we make sure that the ID is after the Twitter ID that we have provided here. And these are the ones we are getting from here. So these specifically for Peter will be these. For Peter Cook will be these. So any tweet after this specific ID is checked for if it has Peter, and then it's returned. The timeout is in case when there's a network issue, or you want this to reiterate if there's any errors. It attempts several times. Then you can also decide how many tweets do you want. You can limit, you just want 100, the 100 tweets that are possible, or 1,000 or 1,000,000, depending on what you wish to get. And then